Okay, so I've got my pen tool. I'm going to start up here at number 1. I'm just going to click once, go down to number 2, click again, go over to number 3, click again, and then step 4 says to go and repeat step 1, so I go back up to point 1, and just to show you guys what's happening, and it's still probably hard to see, when I roll over this very last point, since that's the beginning of the vector shape, there's an icon next to the pen tool that has a circle, and that means that I can go back and close the shape. So I click on that, and lo and behold, I have a triangle. Since this is a closed shape, I can go take the direct selection tool, click on that top point, and move it around. And since it's a closed shape, it moves that one point. Let's say I didn't go and close this shape. And I had them separated. And actually I'm going to change the fill color too so you can see what's happening. If this isn't closed, then these 2 points get completely enclosed. So let's say I mess up and I need these 2 points to come together. Instead of going back and redrawing the shape, I can just put those points together using the direct selection tool, or we talked about using average the other day. But I can select those 2 points and do Command J, and that joins those 2 points. Okay, this second example is a little bit more complex. Once again, I'm going to start up at number 1, and I'm going to click, and it says to drag over to the box to the right. So I'm going to actually hold down Shift 2, just like when you create lines. If you hold down Shift, it'll move things like handlebars in either the horizontal axis or the vertical axis. So I'm going to hold down Shift and drag that right handlebar to the box on the right, and then let go. Then I'm going to go back down to number 3, click and drag. I'm holding down Shift once again to get that completely vertical handlebar. Going over to point 6. Oh, my bad. I thought it looked weird. Okay, point 5. Going over to 6. 7. And then I'm going to go back up to 1. And I'm still looking for that circle next to the pen tool icon. I'm going to click, I'm going to hold down Shift still, and this other handlebar, I'm going to move it. I'm moving my mouse to the right so I can extend the handlebar on the left. I'm going to try to make it about the same length as the one on the right. So that gives me a circle. It's not a perfect circle. I can always go back with the direct selection tool and select the handlebars and drag them out a bit to make them more rounded. But normally if you wanted a perfect circle, you just use the circle tool. All right. Once again, a few more directions to follow. Let's see if I can do this. All right. So I'm going to press like before and drag down to the second box and release. Then I'm going to click over here Just click once and release it, so I start to get a wave. I'm going to click again and just drag the handlebar down. Go over to 5, click and release. I'm going to go back to the same point, and in this instance, like I said before, if you roll over a point that's already there, usually the icon that's next to the tool will change. In this instance, there's a little mini convert anchor point tool icon, so a little caret that shows up next to it. This means I can click on that point and adjust the handlebars, so that's what's happening. So I'm going to click, drag down, release. So I'm changing the way the handlebars work. Clicking on point 7, clicking again, dragging and releasing. So I'm actually going to take the fill off of this one. So it made a wave pattern. For this one, start at point 1. Oops. Oh. If you want to quickly deselect whatever shape you're working on, if you hold down Shift Command A, it deselects everything. If you want to select everything, do Command A, and it selects everything on your on your screen. So Shift Command A, deselect, Command A selects all. You'll probably. All right, so number 4, I'm going to press and drag the handlebar up to 2, release the mouse, go over and press to 4, drag up to 5, and release. So this one kind of created a really nice smooth curve. And this one is so smooth and pretty because those two the two handlebars are parallel to one another. If I go back and move one of these handlebars so that it's not parallel to the other, then the curve isn't as symmetrical and smooth as it was before. All right, let's see what this one does. I'm going to press and drag up to 2, press and drag down to 4, so this one you've got another system of curves. Same thing as before, all of those handlebars are parallel to one another, so that's why all of the curves are the same and very continuous and flowing. If one of those is off, then so just think about that as you're putting down your points and moving around the handlebars. I'm going to press and drag to 2, press and drag to 4, press and drag to 6, press and drag to 7. So this one created kind of a radio wave. So especially if you've never used the pen tool before, definitely try out this exercise. It's called Exercise Pen Tool 1. Pen Tool Exercise 2 doesn't give you any instructions. So you're going to have to use what you learned in the first exercise to go through and outline all of these shapes. What I would recommend doing is making this first layer into a template layer. And for some reason it's not dimming all of it. Anyway, make that into a template layer and then work on a new layer above it. And choose some other color. We'll do like a red. And just go through and try to figure out where you need to put down points to make these curves. So talking about the clockwork method, for this egg here, I would start up at the top and then move down to the 3 o'clock position. And I'm just going to click and drag the anchor point and the handlebars out until I get that curve where it needs to be. If I want to go back and edit the handlebar while this path is still active, I can go and click on the direct selection tool. Another thing that is really quick to do, if you have the pen tool and you hold down Command, you'll get whatever selection tool you last used. So since I last clicked on the direct selection tool or the white arrow, when I hold down Command, it automatically switches to the white arrow when I'm using the pen tool. So just keep this stuff in mind. The less you have to go back and forth to the toolbar, the better. It just helps you work faster. Then this point, obviously, it's a point. It's not a curve. So I want to take away this bottom handlebar so I can start to do the zigzags inside the eggshell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll over that anchor point, and there's a diagonal line that comes up next to the pen tool icon. I'm going to click on that. It takes away the other handlebar. And so now I can continue the path, but I'm going to continue with straight lines. So I'm simply going to go in and draw over the zigzags inside of the egg. When I get to the end there, I'm going to go back up to the top of the egg. I get the circle next to the pen tool, and I'm going to click and drag to create this other curve. Now this area right here, the curve isn't where I want it to be, and part of the reason for that is there's no handlebars at all on that point. So I want to go back and add some handlebars. This is where the Convert Anchor Point tool comes in. So I've got just the normal pen tool right now. I'm going to hold down Option, and it switches to the Convert Anchor Point tool. So I'm going to go to that point, and I'm going to click and drag, and it automatically adds a handlebar on either side of the point. So I'm going to click and drag that out. And then if I take the Convert Anchor Point tool once again, I can move the right side. And if I move that handlebar so that it's parallel or basically right on top of the path that I'm working on, it makes it a straight line. So now there's still two handlebars, but one is going along this straight path, part of the path right here. The other one has a curved handlebar. So I can now move this around and get the shape to where I need it to be. Same thing up here at the top. You can see the curve here isn't the same on either side. I can hold down Option, click on that point, and start to drag out the handlebars. Oops. So right now those handlebars are actually even. but obviously this other side isn't. So I'm going to take the handlebar on this other point on the right side of the egg and move that down to get it more accurate. So all of these, especially these for the circle and then these 3 waves at the bottom, are just like the previous exercise, except there's no instructions, so you just have to remember how you did it before. The tree is kind of like a little fun thing to do, so you would just try to trace that. It'll help you with making different types of curves. So for instance, you should start, if you start with this one, think about where you're going to place the points. To make the best curves using the Clockwork Method, you would place your points about 90 degrees from one another. Here, what I can do, I can go in, this is more or less about 90 degrees, click and drag to get the 2 handlebars, and then go back to the inner part of the curve and just click once to get the end of that curve. Now, of course, now this point doesn't have any handlebars, but that's okay. With the next curve, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click to the middle of that arc and drag the handlebars out, go back in, and click once. And the nice thing about this tree is that all these little curves are different. So you can start to see, okay, if I make this curve, this right side is has a little bit less of a curve than the left side. So I'm going to adjust that handlebar. Same thing here, that curve is a bit too deep, so I'm going to bring that in. You can just continue around like that. Now for this curve right here, it's pretty shallow. So instead of going to the center here, I'm just going to go up to the opposite side and click and drag that curve out. But I'm not continuing the curve at this point, so I'm going to click, roll over it, and I get the convert anchor point icon next to it. Click once, it takes the opposite side of the handlebar off so that I can continue without adding a curve at that specific point. Are there any questions about using the pen tool? Now for your all's purposes, you'll be working off of sketches. So even if you're really, really comfortable using the pen tool, I would highly recommend that you start off with a sketch. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but it needs to be something that you can go off of and draw on top of, so you know where color is going to go. If you're going to do a lot of shading, you might think about actually drawing in areas where the shape is going to be, where there's going to be a darker shape to create shadow or highlights or what have you. So this is my sketch. I'm going to use my family dog a lot in this class. I have her in a locked layer, so I can work on top of the drawing. And I'll change my line to a different color just to make it a little easier to see. One thing to keep in mind with Illustrator is that you can layer colors and shapes on top of one another. You do not have to completely outline or cut out a shape based on what you see on the screen. So for example, I'm going to start with the head here. Obviously the head on either side here gets covered up by the ears, but I'm not going to go through and actually form the shape around the ears, because I can make the ears into another shape and put those directly on top. So instead, I'm just going to go ahead and build the shape behind the ears. What it actually looks like doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to go around and outline the dog's face. Now after I finish the face, I'm noticing some of these curves aren't the way I want them. So I'm going to come back, hold down Option, and use the Convert Anchor Point tool to adjust some of these handlebars. I might actually select some of the anchor points and move them. So there's always ways to go back and make adjustments. So I've got the shape of the head. I'm going to take the fill out so I can see what's underneath. For the ears, all I really have to do is make one ear, and then I can duplicate it, flip it, and move it to the other side. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down, I'm using the selection tool, the black arrow. I'm going to hold down Option to get the double arrows and drag it over. And then I'm going to go to the Transform menu over here on the right. There's a drop down, and you can choose flip horizontal or flip vertical. I want to flip horizontal in this case. It flips it the other way. And then all I have to do is rotate it to the right position. So it's going to look a little bit different from my drawing, but that's because I didn't draw the ears exactly the same in my drawing. But just to show you guys that you can just duplicate things instead of doing the same thing over and over again, especially if you want everything to be symmetrical. That's one way to do it. Same thing with the eyes. For the eyes, I would actually take the circle, the ellipse tool, and draw an eye. And then for the lids, I'm going to make a shape to kind of curve around them. Actually, I'm going to make this into one shape. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and add some color to this so you guys can see what I'm doing. So for the eyelid here, this is just one way of doing it. I have the circle underneath and then this shape over the top of it. So instead of having to create a circle with that cut out in the upper right corner, I've done that with the shape that goes on top of it. If I wanted to, let's say I don't want that to be a different color, I want it to blend in with the face, I just have to make it the same color as the face. So let's say I'm working, let's flip this in again. Let's say I'm working on the nose here. And I'm just drawing it in really quickly. And I want to break this shape apart. So I've done what I've made a complete shape, but I want to go in, delete part of it, and then add a little bit more. If you go to the eraser tool and click and hold on it, there's a scissors tool. With this tool, you can actually go in and clip a path and cut it into pieces. So let's say I want to cut off some of this bottom part of the nose. I'm just going to click on the path at one area, go somewhere else, and click again. And so now this has been broken apart. So if I take one of the selection tools, I can actually click and take those apart from one another. Now I could go back and take the pen tool. I could roll over one of the endpoints in that shape, and as long as there's a little diagonal line next to that pen tool, I can click on that point and continue the path. And go back to the other side of that path. And complete the shape once again so it's where I want it to be. Now I mentioned before knowing where to shade and add colors. If you are, let's say I'm working on the ear up here and I want to add a little bit of shading, what I can do is take my pen tool, and I've got a darker hue of orange, and draw in a shape. If you have smart guides on, it's going to tell you, so that makes it pretty easy to align. To turn smart guides on and off, you can go up to view and make sure the check mark next to smart guides is on, or you can do Command U, and that turns it on and off pretty quickly. There might be times when you're doing really detailed work and the smart guides get in the way. Smart guides will automatically put your mouse at certain points or areas that are perpendicular or parallel to something else. If you don't want that to happen, turn the smart guides off, and then you'll have more freedom on where to put your points. So anyway, I've created this other shape on top, and now I can go and take my selection tools and start to adjust this shape. So this is just another vector object that's on top of the larger one. Same thing with highlights. If I want to...
Tablets out of that.
Yeah.
My card doesn't work in the lab for some reason, or I would go around. It only works in here.
Oh, okay.
I'll get it fixed, but sorry.
It's all right. Same thing with highlights. So if I wanted to have an area of highlight, I could go in and make a shape, preferably in a tint, something a little bit lighter than what I'm working with. A better example might be down here for the nose. So let's say I want to add a highlight to the top of the nose. I can just draw in a shape like so. And the reading I put on D2L, guys, you should really check it out. It talks more about layering colors on top of one another. If you want to, especially if you've got a lot of layering going on, you could have a base layer, let's say for the body, and then I could put another layer on top for highlights, and then another layer for shadows. So that way, as you're working, you can kind of keep everything straight. Another thing you might want to think about as you're working is using the outline preview. Right now we're just in a normal preview, so you see all the actual shapes and their colors and the strokes and everything. If you do the outline view, it changes all the shapes to the actual outline of the objects. So especially if you've got a lot of fine layering going on, and it's just easier for you to understand where different shapes are by using outlines, you could do it this way. Make sure that your sketch is in an outline. So to do that, go over to your layers, hold down Command. When you're in outline mode, all of the eyeballs will automatically not have a pupil. So to get that pupil back on the sketch layer, hold down Command and click. It'll put the pupil back in, so then you know you can actually see the sketch. Otherwise, it just puts in a box with an X through it for that picture, since it's not a vector object. So if you do that and then you dim this layer to 50%, then you could go through and use outlines and see what's going on. It's kind of like seeing an X-ray view of your drawing. Does everyone get the pen tool? Any like major confusions or anything? All right, I'm going to throw a curveball out at you guys. We talked a little bit about color last week. I'm actually going to require you guys to only use 4 colors. And you have 4 suits, so if you want to, each suit could have a dominant color. But from there, you've got 3 other colors you can pull from. So this will help keep your whole set really consistent, and it'll also challenge you guys to work with layering colors on top of one another. I was going to wait and talk about color on Friday, but I'm actually going to go ahead and get into it today so you guys can start thinking about it. I know we talked a little bit about it, but Pantone colors. When you go and print at a professional printer, you'll get, normally they'll either work in CMYK, which is what we use on the laser printers here, or they're going to work in a color system like Pantone. Pantone has this huge book of colors, and each color comes in its own paint can. And that can represents the most saturated version of that color. So let's say you have an orange like this for the ear. You could go and find a Pantone that closely represents that orange, take it to the printer, and it's going to be the exact same orange that you see in the swatch book, or at least it should be if they're doing their job. So the thing about Pantone, since you're working with a straight out of the can color, you can work with tints. So if, for instance, you want this orange, but you want it 50% lighter, you could take that color, make it 50% lighter in the computer, and when you send the file to the printer, they'll know, okay, that area is 50% lighter, so it'll be half of the saturation of the original color, yeah.
And that still counts as one color?
Yeah. So right now, all of my colors on here are CMYK. So if I go over to my color menu, I get ranges of 4 colors because CMYK are all in that color to some extent. Well, except black. There's no black in it right now. If I do a Pantone, it's just going to show that one color. So what I'm going to do for this ear, I'm going to go to my swatches. Here it is. And on the right side here, I'm going to bring down this drop-down menu and go to Open Swatch Library. And I'm going to go to color books. Under here are a bunch of color books that printers might use. Most commonly, Pantone will be used. It's just the most widely available. It's kind of the standard. And you've got about, I don't know, like 10 or 15 different Pantone swatch books. More than likely, you're going to go with solid uncoated. All of these different books correspond with either the colors that are available in that book or the type of paper it's printed on. So uncoated means just your standard stock paper. There's no type of coating on it. So when it gets printed, more than likely that ink is going to get absorbed pretty well by the paper. Solid coated means you're working with a paper that has a coating on it, something that makes it glossy or matte or something like that. So the ink isn't necessarily going to absorb as much or at all. So it'll have more of a sheen to it. It's the same color, but when you look at the swatch book, the color is going to look a bit different. And it has to do with the paper. There could be some kind of formula, something a little bit different with the ink at the printer to make it look better on certain types of paper, but really the colors are essentially the same. So unless you're going to be printing these out on glossy paper, I would suggest using the solid uncoated Pantone book. And you'll get this huge palette of colors. And I'm going to, in the the paper closet across the hall, there's a bunch of Pantone swatch books. You can ask me or a lab assistant to pull them out for you if you want to look at specific colors, because they will look. But I can go through here and select an orange, and that color automatically gets put into my swatches. So this goes for any color I pick. So as you're going through, you'll want to make note of the colors that you actually want to use. So let's say I've picked this 152, but then I pick all these other ones. Each one of those gets added down here. But let's say I want to go with this orange. Oops. When I now go up to my color menu, instead of having the range of 4 colors in CMYK, I now just have the one color, and the ranges go from the most saturated version to the tint of it. So if I want this to be 50% of that 152, I put in 50%, and it automatically makes it at 50%. Now, this is where things kind of get complicated because we aren't obviously in possession of a printer where we can use all these Pantone colors. Since we're printing in CMYK, the printer is going to have to translate what the color would look like if it were printed in Pantone. So as you're working, probably what you'll want to do is go ahead and make some samples of your swatches and print them out on like a letter size piece of paper and see what they look like to make sure that the colors are going to work for you. Another option I'll throw out to you guys if you don't want to use Pantone is to stick with CMYK but use something called Global Color. So let me go back to the orange I had before. Right now it's in CMYK, but while it's in my swatches palette, if I double click on it, I get these swatch options. And then there's this little box that says Global Color. When I click on that, nothing, it doesn't look like anything changes, but when I press OK and go over to back over to the color menu, it does the same thing that the Pantone swatch did. It goes from the most saturated version of that color to the least saturated version, which is white in this instance. So just like the Pantone, I can put in 50% and get a tint of that color. So if you want to do it this way, then you can create your own colors. You just have to make sure to double click on the swatch and make it into a global color. And you'll know a color is global when you have that little white triangle chopped out of the side of it. The same thing with the Pantones here. The difference with the Pantones is it has that white triangle in the corner, but also has a little dot. So as long as it's got that white triangle in the corner, you're just working with the tints of the color. So to create a palette, what I strongly suggest you guys do is take some rectangles and don't put any stroke on them, just leave them with the fill. Make some squares and choose a color. I'll start out with Pantones and then I'll try doing one with colors I make. So I'm going to have that orange. I'm going to have like a fuchsia. So I've got two warm colors. They're more or less very close to one another on the color wheel. I want to pull a couple colors that are opposite of it to kind of balance things out. So I'm going to look for some greens. Maybe another green with a little bit more blue in it. Yeah, let's see. I'll do like a darker, yeah. So I think these are going to be the four colors I'm going to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and hold down Command and actually select those four colors, and I'm going to put them in a group together. So I'm going to call it Ashley's Colors. So now all four of those are in one group together where I can get them at any moment. Now what I'm going to do, and these are all Pantones, so I'm going to work with tints. I'm going to hold down Option and duplicate these a few times. One more for good measure. I'm going to select each one and change the tint percentage. So I'll do 80%, 60, 40, and 20. And you could do it in increments of 10, whatever you want. But this just shows me what all of those tints look like. From here, what I want to do is see what these colors would look like if they're overlapping one another. Because even though I only have these four colors, because of the way things can get printed, colors can overlap and actually create another color. So I'm going to go back and duplicate this whole set. And I'm going to make all of these overlap a little bit. So right now you can't tell anything's overlapping because all the colors are solid with 100% opacity. What I'm going to do instead is use something called Overprint. Overprint is something that's used by printers to let them know that colors need to be printed one over the other. A lot of times, especially if you're using text in black usually, you'll use Overprint to make sure that the color is as rich as possible and doesn't get knocked out. So right now, let's see, I'm going to change my view to Overprint. And Overprint will also simulate what the colors will look like when they're printed out. So it's another good way, especially with Pantone, to understand what it might look like. Usually it'll be a lot more desaturated because it's trying to tell you, okay, when it prints on paper, it's going to get absorbed, and it's not going to be as bright as it looks on the screen. So I'm going to select the orange here, and I'm going to go to my Attributes menu. If you don't see it, go to Window and go to Attributes. And right now, there's a box that says Overprint Fill that isn't selected. I'm going to select that, and as soon as I do, it simulates that orange being printed on top of the fuchsia. It's very similar to using the multiply feature with the transparency options. But I'm showing you guys this because if you actually go to a professional printer and want to use an overprinting method, this is how you would do it ideally. So now I can see when I use the orange on top of the fuchsia, I get this pretty nice reddish color. I'm going to do that to the fuchsia and the green too. So I'm going to do Overprint Fill. So now whatever is on top, let's say the pink is on top of the green. If the green is printed first, which it would be, then the pink would be printed right on top and you would see the color that's produced. Now right now this blue color is not an overprint. So if this is on top of the green, what's going to happen is that color is actually going to be knocked out of the green. It's a little bit easier to understand if I use a different kind of shape. So let me make a star. If this star is on top of a green rectangle, essentially what's going to happen is the same as if I took the Pathfinder tool actually I'll use the Shape Builder tool. It would be this out of the green. So it's actually going to have the green in the shape I see, and there's going to be absolutely no overlapping of color. The benefit of this is obviously the colors stay true to what they are. There's no creating of another color. The downside is sometimes, depending on the printer and the way the paper can warp and so on and so forth, sometimes the color can creep from one another. So you might get a little bit of the paper showing between. So we don't really have to worry about that so much since we're using the CMYK laser printers, but that's one thing to think about when you're printing with a professional printer. Normally what printers will advise you to do is to add a little bit of a cushion. So this shape is still has a cutout in it, but I've added a stroke in the same color as that blue. And if I make this into overprint, that area will still be overprinted, but there's I'm kind of adjusting for the fact that there might be some discrepancy between the star shape and the rectangle that's been cut out. So there's some overlapping, but depending on how the paper warps or how well the registration is, it becomes less noticeable if I do this. So you can do the same type of thing with CMYK colors. Let's say instead I go in and make my own colors. I'm going to change this pink around a little bit. I'm going to add that to my swatches. I'm going to add the green. And then this blue. And if you guys haven't noticed, there's this box up here with CMYK in it. If I'm in a Pantone color and I want it to convert to CMYK, I can click that and it'll change it back to CMYK. It won't necessarily be an exact representation of the color, but it's Illustrator's closest estimate. So I'm going to click and drag those colors. My orange is already a global color, so I'm just going to make the rest of these into global colors. I'm going to select these and put them in another group. And now I can do the same thing. Hopefully. There we go. Let me try doing it this way, see if it works. I'm trying to make this as quick as possible. There we go. And I'm still in Overprint Preview, so you can see that using the CMYK colors, the colors are a lot brighter than the Pantones. But I can still use them like Pantones. So like I said, if you want to, you're more than welcome to use the colors from CMYK and then convert them to global colors. A global color is, it's basically creating a paint tube color with a CMYK or RGB color. So when you double click on a swatch and bring up this menu, there's a box that says global. When you click that, it takes this color from the CMYK where you've got the cyan, yellow, magenta, and black in different ranges, and it gives you the most saturated version of the color on the right hand side going to white on the left hand side. So now when I use this slider, instead of adjusting the amount of magenta or cyan that's in it, it's adjusting the amount of white that's in it. So just like before, I'm going to overlap these. I'm going to put these all into Overprint. And so now you can see in CMYK how these get translated. I wonder why that one's not showing up. There we go. So you can see those range of colors as well. If you want to, you can try using multiply as well. Overprint, like I've said, is kind of the way to make it completely kosher in terms of using a professional printer. The one other option I'll give you guys is to use multiply. So if you're just in the regular view, not an overprint, you can use the appearance. Let's see. Actually, I'll use transparency panel and change these to multiply. And it does the same sort of thing. It's not really simulating or putting into account the paper color. So something to keep in mind. But especially if you're going to use the CMYK colors turned global, you could use multiply and get a very similar effect. Pretty much my main point of all of this is to show you that you can have just 4 colors and end up with a lot more options. Because just with overlapping these colors that are next to each other, I got 3 additional colors, but I could also take this blue and overlap it with the orange and get another color. I could take the green and the orange and overlap them to get another color. So the possibilities could go on and on and on. If you're working on some swatches, and let's say you have one document of all of your spade cards, you want to make a new document and start working on the hearts. Instead of having to duplicate all of these swatches, you can actually save out an Adobe Illustrator swatch document and open it in other documents. So to do that, I'm actually going to get rid of all these other swatches because I don't need them. So I'm going to select those and press the trash can. I'm just going to leave myself with the Pantones and the Global Colors I've created. I'm going to go to the drop-down menu and go down to Save Swatch Library as ASE. It's really important to remember where you save your swatch files. By default, Illustrator wants to put it in the program swatches, and usually when I do that, I never find it again. So I'm going to go back and make sure I save it where I have all my other files saved so I can get it easily. So change the name to whatever you want and save it. And so then if I go and make a new document, I get the automatic swatches, but I can go to Open Swatch Library. Instead of going to the Pantones or a color book, I'm going to go to Other Library, and I'm going to find my ASE file, and it gives me all those swatches. So now I have access to them. And you can save as many different swatch files as you want. You just have to remember where you put them. So in terms of what you guys are eventually going to be working on, let's see. You're eventually going to be working towards having all of your cards in one document like this. So this is an artboard to the tabloid size. And of course, each card would be different. You'd actually have the numbers and everything. But I've managed to fit, let's see, 12 cards on here. So you can put them all on here. It'll print out on a regular tabloid sheet. I guess you'd still need another sheet for your for the other 2 cards that you're beginning with. But what you could do is you could either make a new document, transfer over your swatches, and start working on the next deck. Or probably what's even easier is to do a save as. So if I'm working in this document, I've already made all of my cards. I can do save as, change the name to hearts. And then I have the exact same setup, the exact same cards, but I can just adjust the colors and some of the shapes and so on. So that's probably the easiest thing to do, is just have a different document for each set that you're working on. You can also duplicate the artboards and stuff, but it's whatever works best for you, really. Are there any other questions? I know that's a lot, but yeah.
The other day you showed us how to get color schemes. Like, yeah, I forgot how to do that.
Okay. So Illustrator has this thing called the color guide, and it's based off of their color system called Cooler, and they have a website too. But color guide, if you don't have it up in your window, you go to window, go down to color guide, and what it allows you to do is select a color that you already have, and it'll match it with colors on certain places in the color wheel. So it's all based off of mathematics. There's no human critique of the colors that are paired together. So it's a good place to kind of start getting palettes together, but more than likely you'll need to do a little bit of editing depending on what you want to end up with. But I selected the orange, and to make sure that I'm actually going to get some matching swatches, I'm going to click that box to the left, and wow, I guess I did a pretty good job with matching these. It gives me it gives me a purple, it gives me a green, and it gives me kind of a dark teal. So I'm going to pat myself on the back with that one. If you click on the drop-down menu, it gives you all of these different options with where things fall on the color wheel. So you've got complementary, the color that's opposite on the color wheel from the original swatch. Complementary 2 gives you colors on either side of the two colors on the color wheel. So an orange has a little bit more red, an orange has a little bit more yellow. Split complementary makes a triangle. So it's the colors that are on each point of the equilateral triangle. Go through all of these. Oh wait, split complementary is more like this actually.
Split complementary, you take its complement, and then
Yeah.
instead of the complement, you take the two colors beside its complement.
Yeah. So you've got the complement that would be here, and then the split complement, yeah, would be the two on that side. Thanks. The triad is the one where it's an equilateral triangle. Tetrad would be ones that are within a square of one another. So on and so forth. Sometimes the color palettes work out really well if you use this one. Other times, like I said, there might be one color, like for example, this compound one. This brown is kind of strange. You might want to take that and make it a little bit darker just to make the whole color palette more cohesive. There are other ways of looking at it too. Let's see. If you go and open up the window here, then you can actually see the color wheel and how all of these are being created. So for this one, for example, it shows me my main color, and then it shows where all those other colors fall on the color wheel. And depending on my options, I can select and move colors around to see how things change. And the colors change up here on these boxes at the top. So if you're completely clueless, maybe just have one color that you know you want to start with, you could put that in here and open up this window and start to move things around and see what colors you can come up with. And then when you're ready to work with some colors, let's see. Then you can go and make a new group, I believe. Yeah. And it'll automatically put those together in a group for you to access. Are there any other questions? Okay. So for the rest of class today, you're just going to work, and I'm going to come around and talk to you guys individually. You should have your theme picked out, and you should have sketches of your first set of cards. You can still be figuring out what exactly you're going to render, but the goal is to have some full-scale sketches by Friday, so you can start putting stuff in the computer and rendering them. And so like I said, you'll work on that first suit, and then from there, you're always welcome to go ahead with the other suits. Like maybe you work better by doing all of the king cards at the same time. You can do that. I'm just trying to get you guys to work and make sure you're making progress. So yeah, feel free to take like a 10-minute break, recharge a bit, and then I'll come back, or I'll come around and talk to you guys. All right?